What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Wednesday, September 15th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 10-game slate tonight, and I've got a bunch of fantastic picks for you. Oh, and good news guys, make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. So let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Julio Urais pitching against a low salary batting team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. Julio Urais is only giving up a .567 OPS versus lefties and a .629 OPS versus righties. He's facing 2 lefties and 5 righties. And on top of that, the Diamondbacks have only hit 10 of his last 49 pitches. That's a .204 batting average. And he's 10,300 FanDuel salary, 200 more on DraftKings, projected at 26.3 fantasy points here tonight, which that projection is a little bit low. I think he can score 35 fantasy points or more in this one. He has an ERA of 2.98. His record is 17-3 on the season, pitching an average of 88 pitches per game, averaging 36 fantasy points per game. He scored 52, 44, and 43 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Julio Urais here versus the Arizona Diamondbacks. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Frank Schwindel with a 57% batting advantage over Ranger Suarez. Frank Schwindel is batting 24% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.221 OPS versus lefties, and Ranger Suarez, he pitches his worst ball by far to righty batters, 32% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.011 OPS versus righties. Now there's no at-bats versus Suarez yet, and Frank Schwindel is 3,500 FanDuel salary, 100 less on DraftKings, so I like that DraftKings price, and he's projected at 13.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 13, 7, and 15 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Frank Schwindel here versus Ranger Suarez. Okay, if you want to save some money with a good pick, take a look at James Mccann with a 61% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Jon Lester. James Mccann is batting 34% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.015 OPS versus lefties, and Jon Lester, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 27% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .887 OPS versus righties. Now James Mccann, the reason I like this pick is because he's 9 for 17 with a .529 batting average and a 1.615 OPS versus Lester. 2 of those 9 hits were for home runs, then he had 3 doubles. So James Mccann is only 2,500 FanDuel salary, 600 more on DraftKings, projected at 8.8 fantasy points here tonight. Now, he's only averaging 6 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 0, 0, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games. But he's got a great matchup here tonight, so I like James Mccann here versus Jon Lester. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Javier Baez with a 43% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Jon Lester. Javier Baez is batting 15% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .804 OPS versus lefties. And Jon Lester, we know he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 27% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .887 OPS versus righties. So Javier Baez is 1 for 3 with a 1.666 OPS versus Lester because that one hit was for a home run. He's $3,800 FanDuel salary, $900 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 34, 3, and 9 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Javier Baez here versus Jon Lester.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
I also like Josh Harrison with a 20% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Mike Minor. Josh Harrison bats 8% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .808 OPS versus lefties. And Mike Minor throws 12% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .753 OPS versus righties. Josh Harrison is 1 for 3 versus Minor, and he's $2,800 FanDuel salary, $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 8.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 4, and 10 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Josh Harrison here versus Mike Minor. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Justin Turner with a 31% batting advantage over Merrill Kelly. Justin Turner bats 8% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .863 OPS versus righties. And Merrill Kelly pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 23% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .784 OPS versus righties. And Justin Turner is 4 for 12 with a .333 batting average and a .725 OPS versus Kelly. He's $3,700 FanDuel salary, $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 32, 26, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Justin Turner here versus Merrill Kelly. I also like Josh Donaldson with a 27% batting advantage over Cal Quantrill. Josh Donaldson bats 12% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .834 OPS versus righties. And Cal Quantrill, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 16% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .757 OPS versus righties. Now I like this pick because Josh Donaldson is 6 for 12, batting .500 with a 1.250 OPS versus Quantrill. And Josh Donaldson is $2,900 FanDuel salary, $1,900 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 6, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Josh Donaldson here versus Cal Quantrill. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I like Fernando Tatis Jr. with a 21% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Dominic Leone. Fernando Tatis Jr. is batting 17% better versus righty pitchers, batting a 1 OPS versus righties. And Dominique Leone, he pitches a .744 OPS versus righties, 5% worse than his pitch to lefties. And Fernando Tatis Jr. is 1 for 3 with a 1.66 OPS versus Leone because that one hit was for a home run. He's 4,400 FanDuel salary, 1,800 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 15 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 10, and 0 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Fernando Tatis Jr. here versus Dominic Leone. I also like Brandon Crawford with a 24% batting advantage over Joe Musgrove. Brandon Crawford is batting 21% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .877 OPS versus righties. And Joe Musgrove, he's giving up a .669 OPS versus lefties. But I like this pick because Brandon Crawford is 3 for 6 with a 1.738 OPS versus Musgrove. One of those 3 hits was a home run, and another one was a double. So Brandon Crawford is 3,400 FanDuel salary, 1,900 more on DraftKings, projected at 9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 12, 15, and 9 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Brandon Crawford here versus Joe Musgrove.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, moving on to the outfield position. Lots of outfielders that are in good spots here tonight. So let's start off with a stud pick. I like Bryce Harper with a 49% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Alec Mills. Bryce Harper is batting 16% better versus righty pitchers, batting a 1.048 OPS versus righties. And Alec Mills, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 33% worse than his pitch to righties, giving up a .892 OPS versus lefties. And Bryce Harper is already 3 for 5, batting 600 with a 2 OPS versus Mills. He's 4,400 FanDuel salary, 1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 13 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 16, 22, and 25 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Bryce Harper here versus Alec Mills. Now my home run hitter, my dong of the day, I like Mookie Betts with a 53% batting advantage over Merrill Kelly. Mookie Betts is batting 29% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .979 OPS versus righties. And Merrill Kelly, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 23% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .784 OPS versus righties. Now Mookie Betts is 4 for 9, batting a .444 batting average and a 1.666 OPS versus Kelly. 2 of those 4 hits were home runs. He's got a double and a single. So Mookie Betts is 4,400 FanDuel salary, 1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 14 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 13 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 15, 31, and 32 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Mookie Betts here versus Merrill Kelly. I also like Mark Canha with a 26% batting advantage
over a low salary pitcher, Mike Minor. Mark Canha is batting 13% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .871 OPS versus lefties, and Mike Minor pitches 12% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .753 OPS versus righties. Now, I like this pick because Mark Canha is 6 for 18, batting a .333 batting average and a 1.222 OPS versus Minor, and 3 of those 6 hits were for home runs. So Mark Canha is $3,200 FanDuel salary, $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 22, and 6 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Mark Canha here versus Mike Minor. Okay, now here's a value play for you. I like Odubel Herrera with a 44% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, Alec Mills. Odubel Herrera is batting 11% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .766 OPS versus righties, and Alec Mills, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 33% worse than his pitch to righties, giving up a .892 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus Mills yet, but Odubel Herrera is only $2,500 FanDuel salary. He's $2,100 more on DraftKings, so I love that FanDuel price. Projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 19, 6, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Odubel Herrera here versus Alec Mills. Another value play right here is Bradley Zimmer with a 55% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Griffin Jax. Bradley Zimmer is batting 33% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .688 OPS versus righties, and Griffin Jax, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 21% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.113 OPS versus lefties. And Bradley Zimmer is 2 for 5, batting .400 with a 1.4 OPS versus Jax. He's only $2,400 FanDuel salary and only $300 more on DraftKings. So I like that DK value play, and he's projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 25, 0, and 12 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Bradley Zimmer here versus Griffin Jax.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.